I must say, fantastic podcast that Jake Humphreys and his pal, sorry, I don't know his name of his pal. Do you know?
Dr. Damian Francis, I believe he's called.
Apologies on that. He did tag us, Jake, on Instagram as well, which is really nice of him. An unbelievable podcast. I'm going to put a link in the description.
Damian Lewis, sorry, not Damian Francis. Damian Francis played for Norwich.
And we'll link it for the full video. It's well worth the hour and a half, but we're going to break it down today because there's some absolutely fascinating stuff what he said and learning about his time away from Bournemouth and then coming to Newcastle. So let's crack on with it. I wanted to start, Johnny, that he took the time away obviously with Bournemouth, and he was saying to Jake that he wanted to kind of mourn the relegation of Bournemouth, and he says that he feels like he's a failure at Bournemouth. But obviously if we look at it from the outside and the things that he's done at Bournemouth, going out of League Two, running out of business, it was him and Jason Tyndall. It was them two scouting everything. Them two being, you could even argue, cleaners to do. They were literally just a two-man team. Obviously, as they progressed League One and Championship, Premier League, they got bigger. But a failure? Is he a failure?
I think he'll look at it as that season was a failure in his eyes. But when you look at Bournemouth, the size of the club, and you mentioned the timeline of Bournemouth when he took charge of the club. It's nowhere near a failure at all. If you're looking at just that season, the relegation, fair enough if you want to perceive it like that, but Bournemouth shouldn't even be in the Premier League, and probably shouldn't even be in the Championship. If you look at the size of the football club, they've done exceptionally well to get where they were.
And you've got to remember it was a ghost goal at Villa Park.
Yeah, I think when you look at it, it's small margins in any particular, if you're fighting for a title, top four, top half, bottom, like staying out of the bottom three, very, very small margins, and that's what Eddie Howe's side lost out on that season. Very small margins, and like you said, that Aston Villa goal against Sheffield United when after the resumption from the COVID pandemic, that's probably what cost him. So it was something that was out of his control, if you like, but he was so invested into Bournemouth, into doing so much, and I don't think it's the last time we're going to say that word, invested, because you can see that in the interview that he does with Jake in particular. He's so invested to anything he does. Yeah, and he was doing 12-hour stints like he was here, but after that he was actually going to see his kids play because they're in the academy as well at Bournemouth, so it was more than 12 hours. He was saying that he wasn't getting in till like 9 o'clock at night and stuff like that. He said that he would have actually left Bournemouth even if he kept them up, which is interesting because he probably feels that he's took them as far as that he could. But I think he's already admitted in the podcast with Jake that he sees himself being too harsh on himself, and that's probably because what drives people, drives him in particular. I think he is being a bit harsh, because if you look at Bournemouth now, even still bouncing back in the Premier League, that's because a large part of that, yes, Scott Parker got them up, but Eddie Howe has laid that foundation for the past decade. Yeah, he certainly did, and Bournemouth are, the ultimate underdog. They're not expected to do much, but they have that, ambition to do as well as they physically can. But Eddie Howe gave them the confidence to do that. I like what he said when Bournemouth first got promoted. We'll stay up. We'll keep this club up. We'll stay in the Premier League. I'm confident in my ability as a coach to work with my players, which he uses that phrase a lot, working with his players, to make sure that they're good enough to stay up, and they comfortably stayed up. But Newcastle got relegated that first season under Steve McLaren and then Rafa.
Scoring plenty of goals. Only criticism that Eddie Howe was the defence, but look what he's done in Newcastle. We'll come on Newcastle a little bit later on this video. So he had time away. He visited a few clubs. He took in different cultures and all different sports as well. I think he also, when he went to Spain, we're playing Rio Vallecano. I think that's one of the clubs that he actually visited. He visited Denmark's national side as well, another club in Spain. It was interesting, rugby, when he picked up the Saracens, but when I was watching it, he said that what he noticed when he went to Saracens, they're more hands-on with everything, in terms of that he witnessed their captain. Sorry, I'm not into rugby league or rugby union. What is it, league or union?
Rugby union for Saracens.
Same thing for me. And he witnessed a captain doing the team talk, not just a team talk on how are you lads, it's an actual team talk on the opposition. So he's actually scouted the opposition for his teammates, not the coaches. So that's something that he's picked up. Not necessarily that he's going to pushing it in the Newcastle squad, but he's picking up different ideas. He wanted to learn better as a coach.
I think that's actually a really good point, though, because you look at Kieran Trippier, who's less. I know
it wouldn't surprise if he did it.
Yeah, exactly, because Jamal Lascelles, yes, he's the club captain and he is the captain, and I don't want to disrespect Jamal Lascelles in that way, but this season Kieran Trippier has been the captain, hasn't he? He has been the captain for Newcastle this season on the pitch, because he has played a lot more than Jamal Lascelles has. And for me, Kieran Trippier has that character, that attitude to do something like that. He's openly admitted that he wants to be a coach, a manager in the future. You can see the credentials he has. He's been under managers like Diego Simeone, Mauricio Pochettino, Sean Dyche, who he started off with at Burnley, and now he's with Eddie Howe, who he was at Burnley with, and now at Newcastle. That would not surprise me if Kieran Trippier had done something like that, because when he talks, I would imagine everybody pays attention, everybody listens, because it's Kieran Trippier. Now, if he's doing that, that would be exceptional. I don't know if he is doing that, but if that is the case, that would be brilliant from what he took off from Saracens. But the rugby union is more about becoming a team. It's very. I know football's a team game, but I feel like rugby's more about the team, because there's more than just 11 players. There's 15 players on the rugby union pitch, I believe. There's a massive team behind the scenes. I just think that team element is so important in rugby, and it's probably more important in rugby than it is in football.
Interesting that. We'll come on to leaders a little bit later as well in the video. You also mentioned that you visited owners of clubs, CEOs, from their perspective, why they pick a manager and how deeply they think about the appointment of the individual that's going to be the next coach of the club. And we'll touch upon this a little bit later, but the two lads that were interviewing Eddie as well said that he missed being a parent, basically seeing his kids, just picking them up from school, parents' evenings, school runs, taking them out. He also mentioned that he took a camper van. He was laughing because he was having a bit like crisis, a bit of a joke. Carl, I'm looking at you for that. But we'll come more on that in a minute, because he just mentioned that again. But he said that he loves developing players, helping players, and he mentioned that not just once, it was several of times. It was like, I want to help the players, I want to help their careers, I want to help them. It's not me, I want to help them all the time. Yeah,
I think that's just the job of a coach, though. Eddie Howe, yes, he is.
But I think that's his passion.
Well, of course it is, but I think that's
some of the coaches aren't. So if you look at Steve Bruce, for example,
Steve Bruce wasn't a coach.
I know, but I look at that and think Eddie Howe wants to be on the training pitch because he gets a joy from seeing a player develop.
Steve Bruce was a manager. He wouldn't take sessions. It would be, the other Steves
and to quote, he said, "I found a group of players who want to be coached," which surprised me.
Yeah, that was absolutely phenomenal.
I
think that just screamed what was happening behind the scenes at Newcastle before Eddie Howe came in terms of the management side of things and in terms of the coaching side of things. It was kind of almost like, right boys, we're going to do a five-a-side today. There was nothing behind it. Exactly, go and play and enjoy yourselves. I think Eddie Howe would probably have had a dossier on every single player, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and trying to improve them. And we have seen that with so many players. Not necessarily players that we've bought in, but players that have been at the club for a couple of years. Miguel Almiron, Joe Linton.
Fabian Scher's now improved.
Fabian Scher. I would say Emil Kraft's improved incredibly well before he got his injury. Sean Longstaff you can put in that category. Joe Willock you can put into that category. There's so many players that you could say he's improved them. And then you're not even coming on to the players that he's managed to buy. Bruno Guimaraes, oh my God. How much has he improved since he first started playing for Newcastle? Dan Burn at left back, centre half. Sven Botman, we've seen the early stages of him. Yeah. Could he be coached even better at 22? I would say yes.
Improve, yeah.
Exactly. So there's so many good players that Newcastle have now. When, let's say, 8 months ago, there's a lot of question marks.
Yeah, spot on. Right, it is the anniversary of Eddie Howe this week, being here for a year, and the lads moved on to how do you get the job. So interestingly, and I kind of laughed because I thought, this is the old guard of Newcastle, because they actually interviewed him on a Zoom call, believe it or not, with several people in there just watching, just observing. He said that it was very difficult to show that what he is over that kind of format, because it was just a verbal, there was no charts, there was no diagrams, it was just word of mouth. Interesting, it was over Zoom though, not in person.
I think obviously there was still COVID complications. That might have been why. You don't know where some of the people would have been in the country or around the world, and I think that's probably why it was done over Zoom, just to be on the safe side. I know it's probably not the most ideal for any candidate to try and express themselves, but I think you can speak to somebody on the phone, you can speak to somebody over Zoom, but actually speaking to them face to face, you get more of a rapport, more of a relationship, and you can be more in detail, if you like, and express yourself and show why you should be the man.
That's why I remember Rafa would always do it in person.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that theory of trying to do that. I think it's not a bad way of doing things. I think, look, Eddie Howe must have said some right things because he was down at the final too. I can't imagine Newcastle just interviewed 2 people for the job. So I think it's interesting, but I do think that he must have said something that really connected, because let's be honest, out of that 5-person committee, it was 3-2 to Emery. There was 2 people that were very impressed and thought Eddie Howe should be the man.
Yeah, I did see it on the envelope. I know I pipe my gums about that all the time, but so the question was thrown back at Eddie, what did you have to do in the interview then? So you just literally said that the owners and the directors, whoever sat in on it, want to know what Eddie thought of himself, what his beliefs were, what the transfers were, what would supporters like. I think supporters, majority supporters would have wanted Eddie Howe in originally. I think he would have been on short list of at least 10. I think we're comfortable that everyone might have different opinions, but you'll be in that top 10 without a shadow of a doubt. He's available, he's free, and look at it now, 99.9% will want Eddie Howe to stay if he was being poached by a Barca or a Real Madrid or something daft like that. He went on to say that he doesn't feel pressure from the owners. You know how the ambition for the club is just to go up and up and up. He said he puts the pressure again on himself. He doesn't feel pressure from the outside, which is interesting, because some players and some managers, if they're getting heat on bad run of games, like haven't won in 5, the pressure will then mount. You can see cracks happening, but with him, he doesn't feel that.
I have to say, he probably won't feel that because he's not really had any pressure on at Newcastle, and I'm no disrespect to Burnley or Bournemouth. Pressure at Newcastle to pressure in Burnley and Bournemouth is so different, and he hasn't really experienced that. So
maybe the relegation with Bournemouth potentially.
Possibly, but Bournemouth, let's be honest, if they stayed up brilliant, if they got relegated, it wouldn't have been the end of the world. The fans would have been like, look, Eddie, we trust Eddie Howe. If he was to stay, which I know he didn't, they would have still trusted him and believed in him and gave him all the support because of the work he had done previously. I don't think he's necessarily felt that pressure. There's been a couple of little moments, like I would say the Leicester game and the Leicester away game last season, and the Cambridge game, and possibly the Watford game. Those were moments, but since that Watford game, there's never been a question mark on Eddie Howe. Yeah,
it's been absolutely class. And of course, he was asked the question about the elephant in the room, Unai Emery. He said he wasn't that worried about it, because obviously the club were speaking to Unai Emery and Eddie Howe at the same time. He said he just couldn't control that. But what was interesting is that he does believe in fate, and fate obviously came. Eddie Howe got the job. Unai Emery stayed at Villarreal for a short period of time, and now look at him now, he's back in the Premier League with Villa. See how he gets on with Villa. Great win last weekend, but wasn't that worried about it. He got the job and he believed in fate.
Yeah, look, I thought he answered that question pretty well, actually, because Unai Emery has, whether you like him or not, done very, very well in his managerial career. I know he's gone to Aston Villa, and that's a slight irritation of mine, but he has won the Europa League. He has done very well in Spain. He did an okay job at Arsenal. I think it was quite difficult to take over Wenger under the circumstances, but he did have a. That
shows you how well Wenger actually did.
Yeah, I think that first season at Arsenal, he did get to the. He got 5th, got to Europa League final. He probably should have got Arsenal at the Champions League. That's a separate conversation. But Unai Emery has a very good footballing CV, and you would want to try and get him as your manager. You would.
Do you feel that because of his language barrier, do you think fans would have warmed to him as much as what Eddie Howe has?
Yes, because I think you've seen it when, I think there was a poll, wasn't there? There was a poll, who would you rather have, Unai Emery or
So let's just say Unai Emery had done exactly the same job as Eddie Howe, which is fantastic, by the way. I still think people will go Eddie Howe more to warm, not so much in saying his ability, I just think his approach.
Possibly, but they are very, very different in terms of how they play football and from what you've seen over the years. But I don't think there's a lot in it between how they coach. Like in terms of, if you say who's a better coach, yes, they've got different theories, but I think both of them are very, very good coaches. I think Unai Emery has had bigger clubs. Like he hasn't managed a Bournemouth or a Burnley. He hasn't. He's been managing Arsenal or Villarreal or Sevilla or PSG. You know, that's the calibre he's been managing. So it is difficult. But
would you say Villa's the smallest club
that he's
managed?
It's one of the smallest. I would say it's one of the smallest clubs. Yeah.
I'll say it is.
I would say they're probably just about bigger than Villarreal. But
right. So Eddie Howe's got the job. He's in. Everyone's ecstatic. Everyone thinks we're going to go flying. Obviously, results didn't happen straight away. He wasn't worried. He mentioned about that, obviously, because it took a while. As Johnny said, once we got dumped out the FA Cup and then the Watford game, and then it started to spiral into good form. But the first thing he did, which isn't a massive surprise, he went to the three players that he knows, which is Callum Wilson, Ryan Fraser and Matthew Ritchie, to basically just tell the squad, look, this is how he works, he's demanding, this is what's to come. I don't think we're surprised by that.
No, not at all. I think we're bringing Bournemouth to Eddie, aren't we? As the saying goes. And look, he knew what Callum Wilson was like. He knew what Ryan Fraser was like. He knew what Matt Ritchie was like. I think the Ryan Fraser one out of the three was the most interesting one because he did leave Bournemouth.
Yeah, under a cloud.
Obviously, he didn't want to play when he had a month left on his contract, and you know it would have scuppered a chance potentially got an injury for another move, and that move was Newcastle. Now, it just shows how good of a man manager Eddie Howe was that there was no big deal. I think he was almost said, that's football. He's like, you completely understand it's football. You've got to look after yourself because it's a short career. So when he had those three on side, and you can tell straight away, I bet they must have been buzzing. I imagine they would have told lads, yeah, we've got a good one here, boys. He's a good coach. He'll give you this, he'll do this. Certain things he won't do, but his methods are brilliant, and the training sessions are good. We can really improve as a team, and I think that's probably the biggest thing you can take from that. Yeah,
and Jake asked Eddie what the players say about you. He said that he thinks that he's intense. He admits that he's intense, but he's, again, that word, focus on the players' careers, which can also be seen as a negative, as demanding. And the aim was, when he come in, it was simple: stay up. That was the vision. Newcastle were seen in the league table. We were stranded towards the bottom of the game, and he mentioned the Norwich draw when Keoghan Clark was sent off in 9-10 minutes, and then we went 1-0 up, conceded late on. But he's seen in that Norwich game that was slowly signs that the club, the players are fighting for the badge. Joe Litton, obviously reborn, was put in midfield on that. What was interesting though, which I picked up on here, you wanted to change a few behaviours. Again, that probably falls back to the lack of Steve Bruce's kind of like letting the players not so much do what they want, but they had more freedom. And Mickey take, probably the word I'll probably describe it. So went around and changing a few behaviours. So I would imagine, what do you imagine they are? They're little things like fines and, you know, simple stuff like manners, and you got to sit together around the table and maybe mix it up, or the captain goes first. Is it just small things like that?
Possibly. I think it's difficult because you don't know what happened behind closed doors, regardless of who was manager. Like, I know Steve has got a lot of criticism, and some of it is rightly criticism that he deserves, but you don't know that sort of stuff, but what happens behind closed doors. I think what you can tell though is that there was a lack of professionalism at Newcastle United. That's no secret. I think what Eddie Howe's probably done within the first week, going, look, there are certain things, and I'm sure we'll go into these later, like 3 things that we will always do, or we will always want from you. They're non-negotiables, and I know you'll mention them more later on, but that's what he'll want. And I think he had the respect of the players quite quickly. And I think when you've got the respect of a team, you will do things a lot more, and as in you'll do the right things a lot more. But if you're winning games of football, if you're getting points where Steve Bruce wasn't, you're not going to respect him as much, regardless of what you've done in the game, because there isn't any signs of improvement. Yeah,
and he went on to say how did the club start to turn it around, and he was saying things like, you know, the players have got to start having belief from the training schedule to tailor make the team to make it better. Players need to know, and this is interesting, players need to know that they feel loved by you, that they trust in you. But my manager wants me to work on a couple of things that can make me better, which was interesting. So it's more kind of like a build, break, build, isn't it, format that he's using. And was asking about the question, which was interesting, on like disciplinary of a player. How would he work it? How would he deal with that? And he said that if a player has done wrong, he believes in second chances, and he tries to treat the players like they're his sons. He was saying, he mentioned that a few times, instead of just saying, "Hiya Fabian," and Fabian walks past, "How you doing?" And it's more like, "Hiya Fabian," pull him on the side, how's the missus, how's the bed, how's your back, or how's your mum, or he finds out players' marriages, names, daughters, mum, dad, sisters, brothers, which goes a long way.
It does go a long way. I think you can use that in any walk of life, not necessarily a football manager. I think it's almost like common decency, you know, like
you feel valued, don't you?
Yeah, of course. You feel more like as a player than you do a number. Let's be honest. You know, I think again it just comes back to the human nature.
Yeah.
You know, and the thing with like knowing what people's birthdays are, I think it's just a bit of, I wouldn't say it's genius, but it's something that you can go, well, that's something that maybe other managers don't do.
He's thinking of me. So if it's someone's birthday, I don't know, it's Emil Kraft's birthday because you mentioned him earlier. Not today, by the way. I'm just giving it in hindsight. So Emil Kraft, Eddie Howe knows it's his birthday. There's a little cake on the table, something small, subtle, but it'll make that player think he's remembered my birthday. It's small things that make a player. And he mentioned that he wants players will show you if they're going to be with you or effectively against you. The majority of that Newcastle squad, when he inherited, yes, there are probably one or two that didn't want to be there, probably because they're not playing. Maybe Dwight Gale, Jeff Hendrick, Kieran Clark, because he wasn't listed in the 25-man squad. But in general, you've got to say all the squad are with Eddie Howe. And when he came in, management came in, he had a one-to-one with every single player in training. So instead of just setting the group off, he pulled every single player and went through every single player one-on-one training. I think, again, that's man management.
I think it's just to kind of get a feeling of what each person thought. And everyone's different. Everyone's got a different opinion. So you might go, well, actually, I'm enjoying how I'm playing. I think I'm playing well. I know I can do more. I don't know exactly what you want from me. Just simple conversations. Eddie Howe might say, look, well, actually, I think you're really good at this. I think you can work on this.
Just flabbergasted me. We go back earlier on in the video. I found a group of players I want to be coach.
But I think that's just,
you're a professional athlete playing the Premier League, and your former manager doesn't coach you. It's just head scratching. It's like, what the fuck?
But I think because they were so used to Rafa, and Rafa is an excellent coach, regardless of what other fans of other clubs might say. He is an excellent coach, and if he was doing so, like, his coaching would be so detailed compared to what he would have been like to what Eddie Howe, to Steve Bruce. That's completely different. And then from Steve Bruce to Eddie Howe is completely different. If it was, say, from Rafa to Eddie Howe, I don't think there would have been a massive difference because they're both quite detailed in their work. But that 2-3 years, even though Newcastle, when you look at the results side of things, apart from the start of the season that Bruce eventually got sacked in, 12th place, 13th place, or 13th place, 12th place on paper is not bad at all. But look, we weren't playing well, we didn't look fit, and we were certainly off the pace in some games, and we would have got relegated last season if Steve Bruce was the manager for the whole season, no doubt about that.
We had a maul in the camp, remember? Them stories that kept coming out and we don't hear them anymore. But ask a question about, like, you know, player initiations. He's all right with it, but what he does do, it started off once a week and now it's every couple of weeks, is that a player must get up in front of the group and tell a story about something. This could be something in their life. It could be good, bad, emotional, happy. Eddie Howe set it up first, and of course he set it up. He mentioned that he has to go first, talk openly and honestly. Again, that's man management, bringing the players on board with you. And it's interesting because every couple of weeks a player has to get up and tell a story, and it'll be fascinating to see what's being told in there. And obviously, but that, what it does, it unites a squad together like that.
Oh, it really does.
Because it's like, I'm with you. Yes, you've been through the mire. Yes, you've been through the ship. But you know what? I'm going to play alongside you, and I'm going to make you better. It's supporting it.
Yeah, but for example, Nick Pope's story will be so different to Bruno Guimaraes' story. Bruno's story will be so different to Sean Longstaff's story. Longstaff's story, you know, you get my point. Every story is different, but you're all at the same point in your career right now. So if you know, for example, that, I don't know, someone had a bad injury and they don't really like talking about it, then you're not going to talk about it. Do you know what I mean? It's just little things like that. But I do think it's important that they do have that honesty within the group, because you're going to have a lot of young players coming in as well.
Like Ali Anderson will be looking around.
They're thinking, well, I'm confident to say this about me. I think that's just the modern coach, the modern day coach. That wouldn't have happened under the early 2000s, late 90s with Sir Alex Wenger and
Bobby, even
maybe Bobby Robson, but he was a very, very good man manager. So look, modern day coaching.
Yeah. Next topic was, how's he convinced players to come in? Again, fascinating this. What does he do? And this doesn't surprise me, again, because it's kind of similar to what Rafa did, where you'll have a presentation on the player. Eddie Howe said that when he shows players presentations to new players on how he trains the squad and why that way. So he's got a philosophy, he's got an idea. So at the moment you would think it's attacking high press football currently with Newcastle, so the next player that's linked in January, he'll sit them down and talk, this is why I want you in the squad. And he goes on to say, this is why I love you. So we've been crying out for a winger. I know Miggy's doing mint, but let's just say we need a winger in January. He'll target a winger. We love you because you do X, Y and Z, and this is what it'll bring to the team. And it's very similar to how Rafa, because I've heard all the stories with Rafa, we used to get like little teacups and all that, and we had Isaac Hayden on. So it's very detailed between the two. Are you surprised by that?
A little bit. I like the fact that he doesn't mention any negativities to any new
signing.
It's all positive. And if you hear all positives about you, you're going to go, oh, wow, this manager likes me. I'm going to play every week. I'm going to do this, that and the other.
Stroking your ego, isn't it?
Of course
that's
it is.
What you want.
But that's what you want before you signed. And then when you do sign, you probably want that for the first week. And then you go, look, I've told you why I love you, but I need you to work on these elements of your game just like anybody else. And I think that, again, that goes back to good coaching. But if you show them, as in on a clip, and going, right, what could you do there? What could you do here? What could you do in this training session? Because every training session is recorded as well. And then that comes, and you can. I think a good example would be Sven Botman, because you look at Sven Botman, and he was like, I'm going to know whether they're coming to Newcastle now. And as soon as it was decided he's coming to Newcastle, I can imagine that Eddie Howe was like, brilliant decision. This is why we love you, X, Y, and Z. You're going to be my number one centre half if you do this, and if you keep on doing this, and this. He's probably thinking $1 million. He's 22. He's a young kid. That's how the story goes. But I think you will get a lot more people on side as in new signings if you have that relationship with the manager or the head coach from day one. Because if you don't have that relationship, you've seen it with, I remember when Craig Bellamy went to Liverpool the first time, didn't have that relationship with Rafa, but he went because of the club. But you're already kind of thinking, am I making the right decision? You're already thinking straight away, I know I've made the right decision.
Yeah, interesting. And then we went on to talking about where are we? Players again, staying with them. You want to sign leaders in January, so you obviously named Dan Burn a leader, Kieran Trippier leader, Matty Target's played Premier League football for a while. I wouldn't think Matty Target's more of a leader. He seems more reserved, but that was the aim of players who know the league, who are leaders. We're in it for now rather than later. Do you think Bruno Guimaraes is Eddie Howe signing, or do you think he's been scouted longer than Eddie Howe? That's the only thing I got from that bit. Because the reason why I say that is because he mentioned leaders, and I wouldn't think Bruno Guimaraes would be in that category.
Not necessarily, but I think with Newcastle, you've seen it over the years, even in the Ashley era, they were always linked with, I'm going to put it in
French players,
Hollywood names. Aubameyang was linked heavily. Lacazette was linked heavily.
Yeah.
Never obviously happened. There was a few names like that over the years. So with Bruno Guimaraes, they probably had been scouting
Chris Wood leader.
The French, the French leagues, the Dutch leagues, or whatever, and they probably did like the look of Bruno Guimaraes, but they probably seen other teams that were linked with him and gone, this is going to be a hard one. This is going to be really difficult before the takeover. After the takeover, probably obviously there's a bigger possibility, a bigger chance, but it's still going to be difficult. What Newcastle did, though, which when you hear from people around that story, is that a lot of the clubs that wanted Bruno Guimaraes wanted him in the summer. Newcastle were prepared to go, no, we want him now. We'll pay the money that you want now. and get it done in January. And I think when Eddie Howe's probably seen the player, when they've done all the scout reports, and when he's looked back at the scout reports and looked at himself with his own like a fresh pair of eyes, he's probably going, yeah, I want this player. If we can get this deal done, I want this player.
Yeah, that's the only one that I would say is not necessarily knows the league or is a leader, because that's where Newcastle were struggling. You wanted players that are going to improve, get what out, generating a team spirit as well, which he's talked about as well. We wanted to talk about, supporters, giving you a role on the pitch as well. We're coming off transfers now in this bit. If the supporters clap you off, they know that you've done everything possible on the pitch, and it's that old motto, isn't it? We don't demand a team that wins, we demand a team that tries, or something along those lines.
We don't demand success, but
something along those lines. When obviously now they're getting clapped off 9 out of every 10 games now, home and away, and again it's that bond that the fans have with the players, because we didn't have it previously.
No, you look at the games. You can look at this season, for example. They were clapped off against Brighton. They were clapped off against Man City. They were clapped off against Wolves. They were clapped off against Liverpool. Didn't win any of those games.
Yeah, the effort. It's the endeavour. That's all we ask, isn't it?
But now, I would say the only game this season probably haven't clapped them off is the Bournemouth game. That's probably the only game where you go, maybe no, I don't think you deserve it this week.
Yeah, we didn't deserve the point of Brighton, mate, but we did clap them up. The way fans always do.
But it's a point away from home, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And you mentioned that in that winning streak that we started to pull away. Obviously, we popped to in Ellen Road, the Leeds win. That was the key, thanks to their goalkeeper letting in John Joe Shelby's weak free kick. Newcastle won that game 1-0. But I wanted to talk about the interesting bit is that he said about the dressing room. He wants the dressing room to be the players. What's the word? Release.
It was the players' room, if you like.
Yeah, it's the players.
It's not nothing to do with this. It's not about coaching. He wants full focus in that changing room. Isn't that it's more just to get ready, get focused. But you're always going to be like listen to music and whatever. But actually take them to a different room, which they obviously made for Eddie Howe.
That's incredible. They've knocked down the wall, put a room in there, put loads of tactic boards in there where they do the team talks away from the dressing room. I don't know any other Premier League side, and especially watching the Amazon documentaries, that does that. They're all in the dressing room. I know they've got bigger dressing rooms, don't get me wrong, but it's still class though, isn't it?
Oh, it's just little things. You mentioned before about the little things. Those little things make the massive difference. It might be that when you go into that room, it's got, like you say, it's got the TV, it's got the tactics board, it's got X, Y, and Z. And then it gives it. It's
like you come in this room, focus now, go in that room, go and party, whatever.
Well, not even party. I think it kind of, say for half time, for example, it might be quite quiet for the first 5 or 6 minutes. Right, this is what I think you're doing well. This is what I think we're not doing great on. This is how we're going to win the game. And then you might see, let's say the midfield threes: John Joe Shelby, Joe Willock, and Bruno Guimaraes. They might talk in that player zone, in that's where the players get changed for a couple of minutes, going, look, we need to do this, and just talking about it. And that's not Eddie Howe doing that. That's not Jason Tyndall doing that. That's not X, Y, and Z doing that. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Quick fire questions before we get on to the stuff that you were saying earlier on. On the pressure, you said that you focus on what you can control: training, team performances, players, motivation, treating people with respect. Control the stuff that you can control, and I think that was key. You also mentioned about the Saudi questions that he gets thrown, especially in the first probably 6 months. People ask him questions about human rights and stuff like that, and he only answers to football because that's what he knows. But it's still important to educate yourself, and it's not just Eddie Howe. Educate yourself. I think it's everybody.
I think it is, but I think the problem is there's going to be a time where he's going to have to answer that question in more detail. It's just when, because there's going to be a lot of, if Newcastle do well this season, and let's say Newcastle finish in the Champions League, and I hope they do, I really do, he's going to have a lot more interviews than he has now, and he's going to be asked in more detail about the Saudis. Jurgen Klopp gets irritated at the minute with just questions about playing on a Wednesday and a Saturday.
It's only because he's not getting the results.
Yeah, but like even Pep Guardiola has to answer questions on Abu Dhabi. So, but he doesn't get that all the time. But with the Saudis, because it's so recent in everyone's minds, it's new. He's going to have to answer this question. He's going to have an answer ready. That's not, I just focus on football. It's got to be something where it makes him look good to the owners. The owners are happy with that answer, and whether the press are happy with that answer is irrelevant almost, but it's got to be a better answer than it is now, because he will get questions asked about that.
Yeah, same as us as fans, we get asked that. Also mentioned when he goes home, he finds it hard to switch off, and he says he is getting better at it. So we'll come back to that. I could imagine, obviously, 12 hours, his focus, his intent, coming home, trying to switch off, see his kids for a couple of hours before they head to sleep is difficult, especially if he's so dedicated to football and he is football obsessed, which is good for that side, but maybe not so much at home, which you just talk about in a moment. He hates, and again, it's fascinating, he hates the side of management where he's not with his players. So that tells me not so much hates doing the media stuff and doing interviews and going to see the owners and what have you, but he misses being on the training ground with his players.
Yeah, but that's just someone that really loves their job. When it comes back to that old saying, if you love what you do, then it's never a day's work in your life, and that's probably what it is for him a little bit. He enjoys coaching so much. He enjoys improving players, which he mentions a lot in this podcast. That I'm not surprised by that answer at all. I'm really not. And you can see on the training pitch that it's working on the real pitch, if that makes sense, on the matchday pitch.
His phone must be going off all the time because he's actually gone out and say he hates going a day without speaking to his players. I mean, that's incredible. And he hates being a distant figure to his players as well. So again, this is more the human side of it as well. But if someone's got a problem, he hates the fact that they can't go to him as well. Away from the football side, it's more of a manager side, a human side of it, that you're being managed correctly, that your manager is there for you. So it's fascinating. I find it really fascinating. And a tongue-in-cheek question came: who coaches Eddie? It's his wife. Believe it or not, his wife can read him like a book, from what it sounds like. That if he knows he's having a bad day, that because someone has to support Eddie Howe, doesn't it?
That's always going to be your family, regardless of that's for any person, any job. You know, if you take away the stresses of your working life, who are you going to talk to about it? It's going to be your family. It's going to be your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife, your brothers, sisters, whatever. You know, that is who you're going to speak to, and especially in football, where at a drop of a hat you could be at the top of the country or the bottom of the country in Eddie Howe's case, but you need people, special people in your life that understand what you're going through.
Yeah, that goes down to the mental health, doesn't it? Again, it comes back to the family stuff where he hates missing his kids' birthdays when he's not there. He loses that moment. He found it out that, the break he had away from, he hired a camper van, went on a few trips and spent time with his family. So I got the sense he feels guilty a little bit that he's missing the sports day, he's missing parents' evening. But that's why he enjoyed his time out. But I get the sense that, yes, he loves his work, but there's a bit of a guilt there.
I think that's going to happen in the game he's in the job he's in. It has to be. It has to be because, he pretty much admitted he does pretty much 12-hour days at Newcastle, minimum. Unless there's a match, maybe it might be a little bit less. But if you're doing 12-hour days, probably 4 or 5 days a week, 60 hours. That's a lot of time, and you have to try and give yourself a little bit of time with your family and your friends. But in football, it's so different.
Coming towards the end now, some interesting stuff. Non-negotiable behaviours. You looked at 3. So the first one being always give your best. I think that's pretty up in everyday life. You go to your work, you want to do your best. You'll be asked to give your best as well. Same as me, same as you watching home. Be willing to learn and improve, which is, again, you did mention it's basic, but 3 simple things that go a long way in life. And put your interests of the team before your own, which was interesting. So I'll say Maximum, I'll use him because you would think he's more about himself more so, but we interviewed him. What did he say?
He wanted to get Newcastle in the Champions League.
It's about the team.
It's a team. There you
go. So that'll be labelled at him more so probably than any other player on the squad I would have thought of. But he goes to show you now it's a team thing. He hasn't started the last couple of games, so it's about the team rather than the individual. So that was interesting. I like that answer. Biggest strength? Again, I'll let you guess at home. Go on, have a quick guess at home. I'll come back to that. His weakest strength is he's too hard on himself. Do you get that? Do you get that vibe?
100%. And they asked him very briefly afterwards what would a teenage Eddie Howe say, or a early 20-year-old Eddie Howe say to himself now? He says, don't be too hard on yourself. You literally don't be too hard on yourself. You've got to take the rough with the smooth. You've got to try and enjoy what you do. And he certainly does it up to a point, but if you take away if there wasn't, say, a match at the end of the week, this would be the perfect job for Eddie Howe. If there wasn't a match at the end of the week.
He loves it. He loves coaching.
He just wants to. I think he'd be very, very happy just coaching Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, off Saturday, Sunday, start again. But obviously that doesn't work like that. But yeah, you can't. I think the more experience you get in the game, you can't be too hard on yourself, because you don't know when you could be out of a job, and then you can't feel sorry for yourself when you haven't got a job.
So his biggest strength for you is probably try to guess that last minute. He's been talking about it. We've been talking about it all. He's been talking about it on the podcast with Jake. His work ethic. It's right there. It's right there. He works incredibly hard, and it pays off, doesn't it? And the last two things he was asked, what would be the two things you could change in your life? So the first one being when he was playing for Bournemouth. He mentioned that Portsmouth. Sorry, got Bournemouth on the brain. It's only next door, Portsmouth. Well, he played two games and he got injured, but every cloud has a silver lining, because if he didn't pick up those serious injuries he mentioned, he wasn't the player that he was after that. He wouldn't have had the coaching career that he had, because he got thrown into the Bournemouth job at 31, and look at what he's done at Bournemouth, look at what he's done at Newcastle so far, which is incredible. And a quite emotional one, the last one, wasn't it? Because when he was at Burnley, he was going through a lot. He was driving back and forth because his mum was really, really ill, and I got the vibe that he regretted it, not being at the bedside because she passed, and he just wanted the chance to speak to his mum before passing away, which I thought was really nice. And everything that she's done, because she would have done sacrifices for him, for his career early on in his life, how grateful he was for everything that she had done for him. So I thought that was lovely. That
I think that just shows the human side of Eddie Howe. But you can almost tell he nearly got emotional. You could tell in that answer that he nearly went there. But I think that's just natural, with anybody, with the relationship they have with their parents. But I think Burnley was so far away from Bournemouth. It's not like it's just down the road. You're talking about 4.5 hours.
It doesn't surprise me that he didn't do that well there, because
too much too soon.
Potentially, yeah.
Too much too soon. I think he probably, if he was 41 and then had that chance at Burnley, maybe he's obviously a little bit older, but he was still in his early to mid 30s at Burnley, with a club who had just had been in the Premier League in the last year or two. Probably still thought they could get back into the Premier League, given Eddie Howe 18 months to do it. But the job probably wasn't ready for him. He'd be able to do it now, not a problem. But I think when you've got external thoughts about other things and not on your job, which rightly he did because his mum wasn't very well, it's always going to be more difficult. But I remember when he left, but I was living in Burnley at the time when Eddie Howe was the manager, and you could tell that when that approach came to go back to Bournemouth, I think he had to do it for his own mental health more than anything.
I think he would have walked. I really do. I think he would have walked there. It's a fascinating podcast. Thank you for watching nearly 45 minutes in. Go and have a look at it. Let us know what you think of what Eddie has said on the podcast in the comments down below. Go and watch it. The link is in there. It's a fantastic podcast, and it's fascinating to find out the man behind the coaching.
We need to get Jake on the channel.
We do. You did.
Jake, come along to the channel. Come on the channel.
You tagged me on Instagram for a reason. Come on. Talk to us. We'll talk Norwich for a while if you want. It's fine.
We'll talk Isaac Cade and how well he's doing in Norwich.
Yeah, there we go. And Tim Krul, don't forget to.
Yeah, Tim.
He's not getting a game at the minute, is he? But yeah, that is it. If you can help us out, it's a smash the like for us. It's a long one, 45 minutes. And thank you from Johnny, from myself. See you later, everyone. Bye bye.